Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Soul Land 2 Part 267 based on novel. So let's start. Ii Shisui drifted in midair and revealed a scornful look on her face. There were still 10 blood souls surrounding her. The avenging spirits of 2 Class 9 soul engineers. Great stuff. However, soul engineers will only be soul engineers. The strength of their souls is still far from a true title d'honneur. It's a pity. As she spoke, she shook her head and sighed. The soul engineers watching her were furious. Ii Shisui coldly looked at Xu Qianran. Continue attacking if you want to kill me. I'll see how much you're willing to sacrifice. It's a pity that you might not succeed. As she spoke, she started to descend. She pressed her palm against the ground. Strong bloody light spread along the ground. Deafening booms started to echo throughout the entire imperial palace. Xu Qianran and Kong Deming's expressions changed. They knew what Ii Shisui wanted. She couldn't overcome their aerial defense, and thus it was impossible for her to escape. However, even compression array soul tools couldn't cover the ground. Although the ground defenses in the palace were still very impressive, they weren't good enough. At least, they weren't good enough to stop an ultimate d'honneur. The ground shook. The ground beneath Hui Yuhao and Tang Wutong also shook at the same time. They were no longer in the store. They were on the streets. Just like many civilians, they saw the rainbow glow in the sky. Of course, the civilians didn't know what was happening. To them, it was very common for something like this to happen in the Sun Moon Empire. Soul tool technology was very widespread here. Hui Yuhao furrowed his brow. From his perspective high up in the sky, he could see many things. However, his spiritual power couldn't enter the barrier formed by the compression array soul tools. He could only see what was going on inside. As the ground shook, he could roughly guess what Ii Shisui was doing. Yes, the ground might be her only route of escape. But had Xu Qianran really not prepared for this? It wasn't impossible to unleash a protective soul barrier underground, although it wasted a lot of time. Furthermore, it would be very difficult to control. Could it resist an ultimate d'honneur? Tang Wutong turned her head to look at Hui Yuhao. She asked, "Who do you hope will win this fight?" Xu Qianran. Hui Yuhao answered without any hesitation. Tang Wutong was astonished. Aren't you sympathetic of Elder Yi after listening to Long Xiaoyao's story earlier? I am, Hui Yuhao replied, but I'll still wish for Ii Shisui to be killed. There's no room for negotiation. Can you imagine it? What would happen if an enraged, evil ultimate d'honneur escapes? Even though I don't like the Sun Moon Empire, I don't wish to see any innocent civilians killed. That's why Ii Shisui must die. If she really escapes, we must risk everything to kill her. Even though we'll incur Elder Long's wrath, we have to do so. Hui Yuhao was very hard-headed with his words. He didn't hesitate at all. Tang Wutong nodded silently and said, "The fight has been going on for some time. Why hasn't anyone from the Holy Ghost Church come to assist Ii Shisui? Are they really so scared of death?" Hui Yuhao shook his head and said, "No. This must be Ii Shishui's arrangement. It's easier for one person to escape. If the Holy Ghost Church is here, can they resist 4 soul engineer legions? They'll only send themselves to die. The Holy Ghost Church has suffered heavy losses recently. Ii Shisui must have had told them to leave first before she entered the palace herself. It's a pity. Up until now, we still don't know where their headquarters are. Otherwise, we could find many opportunities to make our move if we went over there now." At this moment, a beam of black light suddenly landed in front of Hui Yuhao. He raised his hand and grabbed at that beam of light. It was a black piece of paper with words in some kind of white pigment. When he saw the words on it, Hui Yuhao was astonished. He immediately held Tang Wutong's hand and turned around before leaving. Inside the palace, the ground only stopped shaking after a minute or so. A huge depression more than 100 meters deep had appeared. It was hollow beneath the palace. When Ii Shisui used her palm strike, an entire cave was immediately formed. Yi Shishui jumped down without any hesitation. Because of this, she paid the price of 2 blood souls. Even though there might be traps underground, the geography underground was confusing. She only had a chance to escape if she exploited this confusion. This was why she had to face any arrangements Xu Tianran had made underground. Xu Tianran sighed and softly shook his head after Yi Shishui escaped underground. After this, a sly smile surfaced on his face. As he waved, the rainbow glow in the sky suddenly scattered. Immediately, he flew towards the sky with Zhu Zi. It wasn't just him. Condemning, the Class 9 Soul Engineers and the 4 Soul Engineer Legions all rose up. A black figure appeared in the sky. It jumped into the palace without any hesitation. A low-pitched dragon roar sounded immediately after this. Xu Tianran clearly noticed this black figure, but he didn't stop anyone from letting the figure enter. Instead, a wider smile surfaced on his face. The rainbow glow shone once again. The 4 high-energy compression array soul tools unleashed stronger beams of light compared to before. This time, even the underground of the palace was covered in a rainbow glow. Boom! A boom resonated underground. A beam of light lit up. Yi Shishui was flung into the air by this beam of light. She didn't manage to escape after all. Xu Tianran laughed. Yi Shishui, you must not have expected this. I sacrificed my palace to deal with you. I'm clearly aware of the price to pay to kill you. I drained you to force you to take risks. Otherwise, what if you had some other special ability? That's why this will be your grave. You must not have guessed the true purpose of my 4 compression array soul tools. They are going to be your coffin. This is to protect Radiant City, and prevent the collapse of the palace from affecting anything in the city. It's just that I didn't expect Long Xiaoyao to be so attached to you. This is the best ending. Goodbye, Death God Doluor. Go and find your Death God and the Dragon God Doluor. This is great. As he spoke, Xu Tianran pressed a button at the bottom of his staff. The entire palace shook a little. Following this, an orange-red glow was unleashed from underground. This glow was very weak at the start. It only appeared from the slits. However, the slits soon became bigger and bigger. The glow also became bigger and bigger. The orange-red glow and the rainbow glow of the compression array soul tools intersected. Slight quaking sounds rumbled. It was important to know that this was even after there were compression array soul tools to protect the city. How terrifying must the quaking be to generate this? Hu Yuhao and Tang Wutong weren't even out of Radiant City yet, but they turned around at almost the same time. What they saw was only a huge orange-red ball light rising from the Imperial Palace. Hu Yuhao instantly turned pale. Vicious. Xu Tianran is really vicious. He used his palace to deal with the Death God Doluor. I wonder how Elder Long is. Let's go back. Hu Yuhao pulled Tang Wutong and ran back without any hesitation. Long Xiaoyao's condition was unknown, but Yi Shishui was definitely doomed. This was Xu Tianran's killing blow. He must have been very confident. Right now, Hu Yuhao's train of thought was completely clear. He finally understood how Xu Tianran had managed to trick Yi Shishui. The Imperial Palace was a complete trap. Class 9 stationary soul cannon shells must have had been installed inside the palace. As for how many of them there were, he was unsure. However, there was definitely more than 1 or 2 if they wanted to kill an ultimate Doluor. From the start until the end, the compression array soul tools were a bluff. Yi Shishui's attention was drawn to what they were capable of. They were indeed very strong. However, they were almost invincible when it came to defending. When they were used to attack, it did seem that they were still rather flawed. However, Xu Tianran used them to defend. At the same time, the explosion was made even more destructive as it was confined. The Death God Doluor was most certainly dead. No wonder he had such a strong sense of crisis when he got close to the Imperial Palace. If he and Tang Wutong were in the palace, they would have been doomed too. Even if they could escape in time, they would still be encircled by the Sun Moon Empire. This proved that his senses were very accurate. Not entering the palace saved both him and Tang Wutong. The orange-red glow was getting stronger and stronger. Even the glow from the sun couldn't compare to it. If one watched from above, he would notice that there was an extra sun at the core of Radiant City. It was a sun that was flashing with an intense red glow. This sun was dazzling, but it was filled with death. Xu Tianran had already flown up high. Even though his plan was foolproof, and the soul tools were capable of withstanding the explosion, he still flew up high. There was no harm for him to be cautious, and this was something he did very well. Zhu Zi was behind Xu Tianran. This plan had been conceptualized by both of them. Of course, Xu Tianran had had this plan all along. She had merely helped him refine and perfect it. It was precisely because of this plan that Xu Tianran was able to fully commit to his decision. The plan had unfolded perfectly, and even the Darkness Holy Dragon was trapped within it. Both ultimate Dolor from the Holy Ghost Church had fallen into their trap. The Holy Ghost Church was finished. Even if their remaining people were able to run away, they were no longer a threat. Without the two ultimate Dolor, the Holy Ghost Church was no longer able to threaten the Sun Moon Empire. It would not be too difficult to exterminate the remaining evil soul masters. Right now, the Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion was still by Xu Tianran's side, protecting him. The rest of the 3 Beast Lord-ranked Soul Engineer Legions were scattered around the sky above the palace. All of their surveillance soul tools were locked onto this area. If the Darkness Holy Dragon and the Death God Dolor were somehow able to survive their attack, they would receive a final devastating blow from these Soul Engineer Legions. This was the last step of Xu Tianran's plan. A huge number of troops had gathered towards the palace from all directions. The civilians had been escorted out as the troops made sure that there were no trespassers entering the palace right now. Hui Yuhao and Tang Wutong were naturally exceptions. Under the protection of his imitation, they were able to enter the cordoned-off area with ease. The bright orange light was still shining at this moment. It was clear how powerful that explosion was. Hui Yuhao would definitely not want to try to resist the devastating power within that explosion. The temperature had to be at least a few thousand degrees Celsius. It was not something the human body could withstand. Even an ultimate ice transcendent Dolor like him would not be able to withstand that heat. What a vicious plan! Zhu Zi, was this your plan, or Xu Tianran's? Zhu Zi was also looking at the explosion from the air. Like Xu Tianran, she also revealed a smile. However, her smile was a warm one instead of the chilling laughter that Xu Tianran was giving out. All the important personnel within the palace, including Zhu Zi's son, had already been evacuated. They had only left a few servants and guards to trick the Death God Dolor. At the end of the day, there were a few people who had to die with the Death God Dolor. The 2 of them had to die. If they were to live, Hui Yuhao would have to face them in the near future. Zhu Zi knew that the Death God Dolor would never let Hui Yuhao go. Similarly, Hui Yuhao would never let her go. The only way to resolve this conflict was that one of them had to die. Yuhao, now that I have taken down 2 of your most powerful enemies, you should be a lot safer. After knowing that the man she loved was in a much safer state now, Zhu Zi was very happy. However, some bitterness was infused into her happiness. The reason was that Hui Yuhao would never truly belong to her. However, she was still happy that she could do something for him. This was true even though she knew that he would not want her to help him. Zhu Zi had always enjoyed solving problems through the simplest means. She was happy that the Holy Ghost Church problem was coming to an end. Nonetheless, it was quite a pity that Xu Tianran did not sustain many losses from this incident. There were still several powerful soul masters and soul engineers around him. Of course, Zhu Zi's second plan was about to unfold soon. It was a brilliant plan to destroy the 2 ultimate Dolor at the expense of the palace. Without the palace, there would be no high-energy compression array soul tools. At the same time, the 4 high-energy compression array soul tools around Radiant City were already being used to ensure the explosion within the palace did not flatten the entire city. This was the perfect example of a good scheme. Zhu Zi had managed to combine what she wanted to achieve and what would inevitably happen together in her plan. She was able to be righteous while tricking her opponents into her trap. It seemed as though the power of destiny was fueling her schemes. After seeing how successful her plan was, Juzi could not help but smile even wider. Even if that man would never be hers, there was another person who would always be hers. He was none other than her son. Her son's name, Yunhan, had a special relationship with Hui Yuhao's name. The Yu character in Yuhao's name was like the rain to the cloud in Yunhan's Yun. Hao and Han combined to mean vastness. Xu Tianran naturally did not know what his wife was thinking right now. At this moment, his body was filled with adrenaline. He was so excited to have taken down two ultimate Delor. This was definitely a first for the Sun Moon Empire. After all, Du Buzi had not been killed by him. He had committed suicide. On top of that, he was not an ultimate Delor. This time round, his achievement would definitely go down in history. He would be revered by future generations. Ha ha ha. Xu Tianran let out a burst of deafening laughter that scared Juzi, who was by his side. Now that the Holy Ghost Church had been destroyed, it's time for us to focus on the Star Luo Empire and the Douling Empire. Juzi, I will give you a year to reorganize our troops and replenish them with equipment, manpower, and supplies. A year later, you will set off as the marshal and conquer the entire continent for me. I want the entire Doluo continent to tremble under our feet and shudder under the glow of our soul tools. Once the last empire had been destroyed, we shall rename Doluo continent the Sun Moon continent. But I will not destroy Shrek Academy. Even though they have been going against me, they are still the pinnacle and shrine for all soul masters. At the end of the day, I am also a soul master. Once we have conquered the entire continent, I will make the academy bow down to us. When that happens, I will put on the academy's uniform and attend lessons there. After all, this was my childhood dream. I will then name it the Sun Moon Imperial Academy, and make sure it stays a part of our empire forever. They will ensure that we remain a powerful empire for the rest of history. Long live your majesty! Long live your majesty! The Soul Engineers from the Imperial Soul Engineer Legion cheered in unison. Everyone could see the excitement and anticipation in Xu Tianran's eyes. It was almost as if he had seen the entire continent bow down before him. Even though Kong Deming was standing quietly behind Xu Tianran, his eyes were sparkling with the same excitement as Xu Tianran's. At the end of the day, any citizen of the Sun Moon Empire would be excited by what he had just said. The bright orange light did not start to fade until 15 minutes had passed. Even then, it was fading very slowly. On the other hand, the multicolored barrier formed by the 4 high-energy compression array soul tools had already become very faint. It had become so thin that its colors were almost no longer visible. The explosion within the barrier was simply too frightening. It was so powerful that the barrier formed by the high-energy compression array soul tools had almost crumbled under its power. Juzi, you were right to direct a huge amount of energy from the high-energy compression array soul tools in the outer city. Even though this means that the outer city's high-energy compression array soul tools will need to recharge for a long time, it has allowed us to accomplish our goal. If we had failed to contain the explosion, I believe we would have lost at least a third of Radiant City. It seems like you have made another great contribution again. Tell me, how should I reward you? Juzi smiled and answered politely, as long as your majesty allows me to stay by your side and witness you succeed in conquering the entire continent, that is enough for Juzi. Ha ha ha. You have put it very well. Xu Tianran laughed again. In fact, it had been a while since he had been so pleased and happy. He had not even been this excited back then when he had ascended the throne. The reason was that he was no longer the same person as before. Previously, Xu Tianran was not able to control the entire land before him. Now, he was truly the mightiest emperor in the entire continent. Not only was he able to control the internal affairs within his empire, but he was also able to gain the support and reverence of his ministers and generals. Now that he had conquered the Heavenly Soul Empire and taken down the 2 ultimate Dolor that were constantly bugging him, how could he not be exhilarated? He no longer wanted to suppress his emotions. This was because there was no longer anyone in this world who could question him. He truly wanted to be the first and mightiest emperor of the entire continent. Xu Qianran was deeply impassioned by Zhu Zi's words as he clenched his fists tightly. If not for his legs, he would definitely have moved out with his troops and witnessed the glorious act of his army trampling over the other empires with his own eyes. As the bright orange light continued to fade, he was slowly able to see the situation within the barrier formed by the high-energy compression array soul tools. The area enveloped by the barrier appeared to be very clean. It did not look like it had just gone through a massive explosion. In fact, the entire ground was sparkling clean. That was because there was no more ground. All that was left was a gigantic crater. Red-hot lava surrounded the incredibly deep crater. The fiery liquid was still flowing within the crater, deepening it. Because of the high temperature of the lava, the light within the barrier was contorted and bent. What was originally the palace now only consisted of the 4 high-energy compression array soul tools at the 4 corners of its compound. They were the only things still intact after the explosion. However, even those soul tools were starting to burn up. Traces of black smoke could be seen coming from them. It was apparent that they were starting to break down due to the immense energy released by the explosion. Xu Qianran did not feel that it was a bad deal to trade his palace for 2 ultimate dollar. This was a loss he could definitely afford. However, it was still undeniable that it was an incredible explosion. 10 Class 9 stationary soul cannon shells had been used. The 2 ultimate dollar should be pleased with how their deaths were celebrated. All 10 stationary soul cannon shells were of the same type. They were all high-energy, highly explosive, and heat-releasing. Just a single one of them would be sufficient to take down a normal city. One could only imagine the temperature and explosive forces released by 10 of these stationary soul cannon shells compressed within this small area. A god might not even be able to survive this explosion. Xu Qianran was really happy to see how everything had unfolded. Now, all that was left to do was to clean up the mess. Boom! A loud explosion could be heard from within the barrier. It seemed like one of the high-energy compression array soul tools had finally given way, and exploded. It released dense black smoke into the air as the multicolored light barrier faded. Following which, a chain reaction occurred as the 3 other high-energy compression array soul tools exploded one after another. More black smoke was released into the air. It seemed like all of them had been destroyed by the explosion. However, their purpose had already been realized. At the end of the day, the Sun Moon Empire had paid a hefty price to take down 2 ultimate dollar. They had lost 2 Class 9 soul engineers, a large number of guards and servants within the palace, 4 of the latest high-energy compression array soul tools, and 10 Class 9 stationary soul cannon shells. The value of these things would have been enough to build a huge city from scratch. However, Xu Qianran was still very happy. After all, the 2 ultimate dollar would have been able to destroy more than a huge city if they were to combine their powers. Without the multicolored barrier, the heat from the explosion instantly surged out and scattered in all directions. At that instant, the ambient temperature within the entire radiant city seemed to have risen by quite a bit. The places which were nearer to the palace became incredibly sweltering. This was inevitable. Fortunately, Xu Qianran had prepared for this. He had organized a team to project beams of water into the huge crater within the palace. Huge amounts of steam were released at that moment. It was truly an impressive sight to behold. Xu Qianran, who was still floating in the air, smiled at Zhu Zi and said, "When we rebuild the palace, there is no longer a need to excavate. It is now a lot deeper than before. In fact, the underground walls should be incredibly tough now that they have been baked by the heat." Suddenly, the beeping sound of an alarm could be heard. The sound immediately alerted all the Soul Engineers from the Imperial Soul Engineer Legion, who had been starting to lower their guard. They instantly activated their linked defensive barriers to protect Xu Qianran, Zhu Zi, and the rest. The Emperor's safety was of the utmost importance. "What's going on?" Xu Qianran exclaimed. "Your Majesty, we have detected soul power and spiritual power fluctuations from the crater. The fluctuations are of incredible magnitude, and they are enveloping the entire palace," one of the Soul Engineers reported to Xu Qianran. Now that the Sun Moon Empire had installed surveillance soul tools above the palace, they were able to detect any movement or changes instantly. Xu Qianran was visibly frustrated by the news. Attack! I want all of you to launch an all-out attack on the palace. He did not dare to imagine what would happen if both Ultimate Dolor were still alive. Suddenly, the steam turned into countless snowflakes. Huge snowflakes began to dance above the palace, and their extremely cold auras chased away the intense heat which was radiating from the crater. At the same time, they prevented the surveillance soul tools from monitoring the events unfolding within the crater. A series of loud explosions continued to ring in the air as the crater within the palace became deeper with the attacks which thrown into it by the soul engineers. All sorts of lights from the explosions crushed the snowflakes as Radiant City trembled under the explosive power of the Imperial Soul Engineer Legion. Juzi could not help but clench her fists at the sight of this. She naturally recognized those snowflakes. Idiot! Why are you here right now? Are you actually trying to save the death god Dolor? Why? Of course, Hui Yuhao would not be giving her an answer. The reason was that both he and Tang Wutong had already disappeared with the two ultimate Dolor when the cannons were fired. The security established by the troops was nothing when it was up against Hui Yuhao's imitation and spiritual interference domain. The clothes on Long Xiaoyao's body had already disappeared. What was left were just the burned black dragon scales on his body. On the other hand, Yi Shishui's body seemed to be giving off a radiant aura. At this moment, she seemed to have become a holy angel of sorts. However, her body was somewhat translucent. The blood soul demon puppet aura on her body had vanished completely. Long Xiaoyao was carrying Yi Shishui. There was a mysterious glow on Yi Shishui's face as she stared at Hui Yuhao and Tang Wutong. Surprisingly, she seemed to be very calm about the whole thing. Let's talk later and leave now. This was the first thing Long Xiaoyao said after seeing Hui Yuhao. Prior to this, just when the barrier formed by the high-energy compression array soul tools had disappeared, Hui Yuhao had received a transmitted message from Long Xiaoyao. He had been told by Long Xiaoyao to cover him. At that instant, Hui Yuhao actually hesitated. Even though he had only heard Long Xiaoyao's voice, he felt that Yi Shishui was probably still alive. If he were to save Long Xiaoyao, he would also end up saving Yi Shishui. However, he decided after a short moment that favors and grudges were meant to be settled separately. He should return the favor to Long Xiaoyao before thinking about how he should exact his revenge on Yi Shishui. Even if Long Xiaoyao were to try and stop him, he would never let Yi Shishui get away scot-free. After all, it would be disastrous to let an evil soul master who was also an ultimate Dolor get away. The chaotic explosions continued for a good 15 minutes before they ended. By then, both Xu Qianran and Zhu Zi were already very anxious. In fact, goosebumps had already formed on Xu Qianran's skin. If the Dragon Emperor Dolor and the Death God Dolor were still somehow able to survive, he would definitely not be able to bear the consequences. In fact, no one would be able to take their off. The entire Sun Moon Empire would probably be destroyed by their rage and fury. Zhu Zi, do you think they're dead? Xu Qianran turned around and looked at Zhu Zi. Dead, they must be dead. Zhu Zi exclaimed with determination. This was the first time she sensed cowardice from Xu Qianran. He was actually afraid of what might happen. Yes, they must be dead. They have to be dead. Xu Qianran exclaimed. Right now, all of Radiant City had been locked down by the soldiers and soul engineers. However, their methods were useless against Hui Yuhao. Once he unleashed his imitation, no one would be able to detect him, or the people whom he was bringing along with him. After traveling for a good 50 kilometers, which was but a short moment for a transcendent Dolor, Hui Yuhao stopped within a small forest. He had to stop now. In fact, at this instant, he revealed a very serious and solemn expression. He was about to face a very difficult problem. Even though he really did not want to confront it, he knew he had to settle it now. After seeing how Hui Yuhao had stopped, Tang Wutong naturally stopped moving. She held hands with him as both of them turned around. Long Xiaoyao had been following behind them while carrying Yi Shishui on his back. At this instant, Hui Yuhao noticed how Long Xiaoyao's scales had turned dark red. His old face had also become very red. However, it was not a healthy kind of red. In Hui Yuhao's eyes, all he saw was the aura of death. That's true. Even an ultimate Doluo should not be able to come out alive from those frightening explosions. Long Xiaoyao and Yi Shishui are already more than 200 years old, and are definitely past their peak. Hence, they should be in an extremely dire state. Long Xiaoyao placed Yi Shishui onto the ground gently as he propped her up to allow her to sit up straight. However, Yi Shishui raised one of her hands as she held onto Long Xiaoyao's shoulder. She wanted to stand next to him. What surprised both Hui Yuhao and Tang Wutong was how Yi Shishui had seemed to become younger. Long Xiaoyao was right. Yi Shishui was very beautiful when she was younger. In fact, she did not pale in comparison to Tang Wutong at all. The gentle and radiant golden aura she was giving off made her seem very holy and sacred. This was exactly the same as the time Hui Yuhao had first seen Yi Gai use her angel martial soul. Her skin was fair and porcelain-like. The smile she had on her face seemed to tell Hui Yuhao that she had let go of all of her grudges. Hui Yuhao and Tang Wutong were very shocked by the transformation in her look and attitude. They had no idea what the two ultimate Doluo's current states were. They only knew that both of them seemed to be behaving in a strange way. Hui Yuhao could still sense the pure and powerful soul power fluctuations from Yi Shishui's body. She no longer seemed to have the aura that evil soul masters possessed. However, she didn't seem to be radiating any life energy either. On the other hand, Long Xiaoyao's body was still radiating fairly powerful life energy fluctuations. However, Hui Yuhao could tell that they were deteriorating, and were terribly unstable. Senior Long. Hui Yuhao forced himself to look at Long Xiaoyao. Long Xiaoyao sighed and said, "I know. There's no chance that you will let Shishui go today. I understand where you're coming from. Both of you should also be able to tell that we're almost dead. However, I don't know if I can fulfill my own wish before then. I had originally wanted you to find me after you reached rank 98. But it seems like I'm running out of time." Hui Yuhao kept silent. He had heard Long Xiaoyao's story with Yi Shishui from Long Xiaoyao himself. In fact, he could understand the pain in his heart. "Yuhao, can I ask something of you?" Long Xiaoyao asked. Hui Yuhao remained silent before saying, "As long as it doesn't involve me letting Senior Yi go, I can promise you any other thing." Hui Yuhao knew that Yi Shishui and Long Xiaoyao would never be able to defeat him and Tang Wutong in their current state. Long Xiaoyao shook his head and said, "When I eventually die, I will naturally lose the ability to protect her. I just want you to promise me not to hurt her until I die. Can you kill her after I've died?" Hui Yuhao's body froze. His heart was pained to see an ultimate Doluo going down on his knees for something so simple. After hesitating for a short while, Hui Yuhao replied, "As long as Senior Yi doesn't try to flee, I can definitely do what you have requested of me." Long Xiaoyao nodded and said, "You can rest assured that you will not regret accepting my request. I will definitely reward you for this." As he spoke, he slowly turned around to face Yi Shishui. The look on his face was instantly replaced with the gentlest expression. "Shishui, you are really very beautiful. You have remained so beautiful while I have aged so much." His voice was very gentle as he spoke slowly. It was as though he was confessing something. Yi Shishui flashed a gentle smile on her beautiful face. "No, we have both aged. I never thought that I would be able to be with you until our last moments. I am so happy that things are ending this way. Don't be sad. This is the best ending that I can get." Long Xiaoyao's voice started to tremble. "Shishui, have you really forgiven me? Are you really willing to forgive me for everything I did to you?" Yi Shishui smiled. She seemed to be genuinely happy. "Xiaoyao, you're really an idiot. In fact, it's not just you. Mu En was also an idiot. Both of you are really idiots. Both of you have been played by me all this while. It's just that both of you are too dumb to realize it. You're really a big idiot." Even though she was laughing, tears were pouring down her face. "Why is that?" Long Xiaoyao stared blankly at her. Yi Shishui sighed and said, "You gave way too much for me in this lifetime. Now that we have both reached the last moments of our lives, let me do something for you. Let me remove the baggage you have been carrying with you all this while, and leave our world happily. I can finally share a lot of things with you. Long Xiaoyao was stunned. In fact, both Hui Yuhao and Tang Wutong were stunned. What Yi Shishui was about to say was definitely something she had hidden with her life. What do you plan to tell me? Long Xiaoyao asked. Yi Shishui smiled plainly. That thing. The thing you have always been feeling guilty about actually doesn't exist. If I were to rephrase what I just said, I meant that you did not have to feel guilty about it. The reason is that I had planned it all along. The person whom I was waiting for was you all along, not Mu Yen. I was willing to be married to you. What are you saying? Long Xiaoyao could not believe what he had just heard. Hui Yuhao could see the fear in his eyes. Long Xiaoyao stared at Yi Shishui and said, Shishui, stop it. Stop speaking. I don't want you to spoil my impression of you. You were perfect back then, at least. Yi Shishui shook her head and said, No, I want to say everything. If I can't let everything out, I can't bear to die. Actually, you don't have to worry about anything. Even though you had been protecting me by my side and were even being used by me for all these years, you had not lost anything. The reason is that you have been protecting a woman who loves you from the bottom of her heart. Do you know that? Long Xiaoyao stared at Yi Shishui in disbelief. Perhaps it was because of the current state of his body, but he was actually losing control of his emotions. Yi Shishui continued, Back then, when both of us and Mu Yen first participated in the Continental Advanced Soul Master Academy Soul Dueling Tournament, I had already gone there with an ulterior motive. Back then, I was already a part of the Holy Ghost Church. My sole intention was to identify the best talents among our generation. Hence, I met you and Mu Yen. Both of you were so outstanding and powerful. In fact, I paled in comparison to both of you. All of us were young back then, and it was easy for us to get together. On top of that, I had an agenda for getting close to both of you. Hence, both of you fell in love with me unknowingly. At the same time, I had also fallen in love with one of you. You must have thought that Mu Yen was the one I had loved all this while, right? Now I can tell you truthfully that you've been a big idiot. I loved you right from the beginning. In fact, I had never liked Mu Yen. This video will end here.